Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha. Welcome to my channel, Essential Classical Music, where we look at the best recordings of the classical music repertoire. This video is taken out of my larger video on the major solo piano works. I hope you enjoy it. Now let's discuss Bach's organ works, which is also a gigantic canon, and really, in terms of his impact and what's remembered, he kind of has the field to himself. He was the giant of organ composition. Of course, the most probably popular and famous is the D minor Toccata Fugue, BWV 565. By the way, BWV, that's the numbering, that's sort of like an opus number. That's the numbering system for Bach. Di-da-dan, di-da-da-da-dan, and then the fugue is da-da-da-da-da-da-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan-dan. Anyways, fantastic work. And then also, when you're talking about his most famous organ works, there's the Passacaglia Fugue in C minor, BWV 582. This is just a wonderful work. It's very hypnotic. It starts with this low, deep bass tune. Bum 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 bum, and then it continues with that throughout the whole piece with variations throughout, and it's just really captivating. And then also want to mention the Fantasia Fugue in G minor, BWV 542, nicknamed the Great Fantasia Fugue, partly to differentiate it from the Little Fugue in G minor. That's the one that goes dun 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 dun. But the Great Fantasia Fugue is just this really fantastic work, very majestic, and it's got this catchy fugue. Dun da 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 da. So those three works are probably the ones that you would most often find in Bach collections. Also, some more of the toccatas and fugues. There's the F major, BWV 540, which is just a glorious work. There's the D minor, nicknamed the Dorian, 538, which is also spectacular. It's actually not in Dorian mode. That was a nickname that was given to it because it was written all on white keys from D to D, but it's actually D minor. It just wasn't notated, and the nickname just stuck. So it's sort of known as the other D minor Toccata and Fugue to differentiate it from the famous Halloween one. But it's a wonderful work. And then we have 6 trio sonatas. And these works are they're more kind of simple and playful and gentle. They're not as heavy and florid and going crazy. Like the first one goes bum bum ba bum bum ba 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 bum 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 ba 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 bum bum bum. So these they're really charming works. And then we have tons and tons of choral preludes. These are taken from the cantatas that he wrote. He wrote over 200 cantatas for choir. Of course, he was a church musician, so he just cranked them out. And so he transcribed the chorales for organ. So he has one set that's called the Orgelbüchlein, Little Organ Book, which is comprised of 46 pieces, so it's really not that little. And then he has 6 works that are referred to as the Schübler Chorales. These you see these quite often in different recitals. The most famous of which is the first one, based on maybe his popular choral cantata, Wachet auf, Sleepers Awake, number 140. Dun da da dun da dun dee dun da dun dee da dun dee dun da da. And then you have 18 chorales that are referred to as the Great Leipzig Chorales. Of course, he spent so much of his career in Leipzig at the Thomas Church, writing these chorales. One of the most famous of these is this really slow, mellow one that comes from Cantata number 61, Nun komm der Heiden Heiland. And then we have something called the German Organ Mass, which, if you listen to the whole thing all together, it takes between an hour and a half and 2 hours. It really is like listening to this giant choral mass, but just on an organ, and it's really effective. The bookends of the piece are from BWV 542, which is a prelude and fugue. It's nicknamed the St. Anne Fugue, incidentally, and that's often just a separate piece that you will hear separately. This really grand, beautiful prelude, and then this wonderful, intricate fugue that also ends with, just really grandly. But if you hear them as part of the Mass, in between the bookends, you have 21 choral preludes. And then you also have these 4 duets, and they're called duets just because there's two voices. And so that's the version that's called the German Organ Mass. It's actually Clavier-Übung III. We mentioned earlier the keyboard exercises. So you'll often see it referred to by that name. And it's really an experience to listen to the whole thing. It really is very spiritual music. It really has quite an effect. Okay, so that is sort of an overview of the organ pieces. Now let's talk about the recordings. If we're looking at full sets, the first one I recommend is this just classic version, Helmut Walcha. Walcha was an organist who went blind in his teens. He was a Leipzig native who studied under Gunther Ramin at the St. Thomas Church, which is where Bach had his old job. So he's very steeped in the Bach tradition, and really his interpretations just sound like a from the horse's mouth interpretation. They're very grounded. They're very sensible musically, very, very captivating. Everything is well judged. The instrument sounds wonderful, very well recorded. It's from the late 50s through the early 70s, but you really can't tell the difference between any one when it's recorded, because it all just sounds very clear and full, and just wonderful interpretations. So this is the one that I consider sort of like the classic version. But I also want to mention this one from around the same time, late 50s through the early 70s, from another Bach specialist, French organist, Marie-Claire Alain. This is the first of 3 versions that she did, and they're all very good. I think that the first one has a little bit more freshness to it, to the interpretations. She also is very grounded, also very sensible, logical interpretations, but she has a little bit more flexibility, I would say, with the tempos as well. So this is an excellent version. And then I want to mention a few that kind of are shorter recitals that you kind of get a best of. Starting with the one that I recommend first to anyone who's new to Bach organ is the sampler of the Helmut Walcha series. Now, by the way, forgot to mention, that is his stereo recording. He did do one in mono. And in that case, I think that the sound quality and the interpretations are so good that I would go first for the stereo recording, and only look at the mono if you're wanting to supplement. But this is a twofer that was issued a few decades ago from Deutsche Grammophon. That is from the stereo set. Includes basically all the most familiar stuff: Toccata Fugue in D minor, 565, the Passacaglia Fugue, the Fantasia Fugue, some of the trio sonatas, Schübler Chorales. So a wonderful way to sample Bach's music, organ music, and then fairly similar, although spread onto 3 discs. We have this one from Carl Richter. Now, Richter was, just like Walcha, a student of Ramin at the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig. So he comes from that same tradition, and it does have similar virtues. He tends to be often a little bit on the slower end. It really pays dividends in the Passacaglia and Fugue. Really grand, powerful interpretation. Although he could also be fairly fast in some of the fugues. But it's a really sort of like Walcha, from the horse's mouth interpretation, very good sounding as well. So that's also a sampler version of the works that I would not want to be without. And then we have this one from a British organist who moved to America in his early years, E. Power Biggs. This is how a lot of people got to know Bach for the first time, got to know his organ works. And this is on one CD, but they pretty much crammed as much as you can onto this CD. So it's a really excellent sampler. The interpretations are fairly straightforward. He doesn't futz with things very much. I would say compared to Walcha and Richter, his instrument, it's a little bit more forward, more of a treble sound, emphasizing more sort of the brilliance rather than depth. So another way to hear them, it's a very exciting sound and very reliable interpretation. So if you love Bach organ, I wouldn't want to be with this without this either. And then we have this one from 2000 from English organist and conductor John Butt. This is a recording that gathers together the toccatas and fugues, as well as the 6 Schübler Chorales. And it makes for a wonderful program because the toccatas and fugues, they can be, they're very dramatic, and it's quite an impact when you're listening. So it's nice to have a couple of the Schübler Chorales, which are much more mellow, in between each toccata and a fugue. So really good programming. And John Butt plays the works with a little bit more flexibility and freedom, sometimes a little bit faster with the tempos. It's very exciting, wonderful sound. So it's a really exhilarating disc, and definitely one to recommend. And then finally, for Bach organ works, I want to go back to a historical recording from between the mid-30s up to the early 50s from Albert Schweitzer, a Bach organ recording pioneer. Schweitzer was really quite a Renaissance man. He was a historian, philosopher, author, theologian, a medical missionary, and a musician. So he had quite an eclectic background, and it kind of shows itself in his interpretations. They have a lot of personality, especially that the D minor, the famous 565, is really played with a lot of verve and passion. So it's not your ideal organ sound. It is a limited sound, but mainly this is one that you want to hear just to hear the works played with a little bit of extra personality and gusto. Thanks for watching. I wish you all a great day and happy listening.